The Forum on China-Africa Cooperation is underway in Beijing. Chinese President Xi Jinping has delivered the keynote address at the opening ceremony. The summit is designed to enhance relations between China and countries on the continent. President Xi says China will implement 8 major initiatives with African countries in the next 3 years and beyond. These will cover fields such as industrial promotion, infrastructure, connectivity, trade facilitation, and green development. China has honored its 2015 promise to provide Africa with funding support of $60 billion. President Xi has also made an unexpected announcement saying that China will exempt certain African countries from outstanding debts owed to the Chinese government. CGTN's Jen Keo is in Beijing following these developments from that summit. She joins us live from there. Jen, expectations have been high about the strengthening of ties between China and Africa. What are the highlights of Xi Jinping's speech at the opening ceremony?
Well, Penina, you've just mentioned them, and it has to do with that, with those 8 major initiatives that he's announced during his speech between China and African countries over the next 3 years and beyond. And like you mentioned, they will be covering a wide range of areas and sectors, including manufacturing, industrialization, infrastructure, connectivity, which basically has to do with the Belt and Road Initiative, trade and green development. Now, of course, part of those initiatives, President Xi says, will include the setting up of what he calls a peace and security body that will basically aim to boost China's peacekeeping efforts on the continent, plus promote law and order. Now, Penina, the president also talked about China being committed to remain open and grow an open economy for a win-win cooperation between China and Africa. And in this, he said that he was once again saying that China is against or opposes protectionism and unilateralism. Of course, this has to do with the ongoing trade war that has been going on between China and Africa. The president saying that he's looking forward to a win-win and open business between China and Africa. Now, the president also said that China is ready. This is in capping it all up. He believes that with the FOCAC summit and moving forward over the next 3 years, President Xi basically said that China is ready to help Africa in alleviating poverty, improving the livelihoods of its people, plus promoting culture between the two people. And of course, the highlight, he also mentioned the fact that China had actually lived up to its promise, which he made in 2015 during the last FOCAC summit, in giving that $60 billion in financial support for African countries for development. Penina?
Well, Jen, the president has touched on quite a number of interesting things there, but how has the leader's remarks, Xi Jinping's remarks, how have they been received?
Well, we've had a number of keynote speakers. Even during that speech, we had from Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa, Rwanda's Paul Kagame, and the last speaker was the African Union chairperson, Mahamat Faki, who have all talked about China being a friend of Africa. But of course, these leaders were also talking about greater transparency. They were hoping there can be more transparency between China and Africa, even in terms of trade. But they also said that they hope that the FOCAC summit over the next 3 years will also lead to deeper cooperation between the two sides in a number of sectors. But also we had from the UN Secretary General, what's his name? UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, who basically talked about Africa's potential and also said that this was a historic moment between China and Africa. And once what was coming out between the speeches of these people who talked about, who spoke during the opening summit, was the link between the FOCAC summit and what we've seen in the AU 2063 agenda and the UN 2030 agenda. Penina?
Obviously, Jane, quite some interesting developments coming out of this year's FOCAC summit there in Beijing. So take us through what's going to happen next.
Well, over the next 2 days and actually tomorrow, what we'll be seeing, there's going to be roundtable discussions tomorrow between the president and the African presidents. That's President Xi and African leaders. We're also going to see a joint presser by President Xi Jinping and South Africa's Cyril Ramaphosa. Of course, the highlight will be the signing of what they are calling a declaration and an action plan between African countries and China that will be observed over the next 3 years. Penina?
All right, Jane, we appreciate very much this insight. Thank you for joining us.